So we've been talking about data visualization and starting to think about patterns and complexity and how to do that well. And so we should have a conversation about dashboards. Dashboards are a way of presenting information that are in sort of an interactive form that's used by organizations and used by governments to communicate information to the public that I think are widely used and have some tricks to being able to produce good dashboards. And so let's talk about some of what goes on with that. So dashboards are a data visualization approach in which you're taking key information, things that organizations want to track, and presenting that information out in a way that isn't just sort of reporting, but allows for some interactivity. So they're sort of like controlled Excel tables where you can do certain things to sort of filter or dig into the data, but other things are denied to you. You don't get access to the actual data itself, but just the ability to visualize in different ways. And so a good dashboard is one in which we are thinking seriously about how to communicate information to people. What are the graphs that are going to help them to understand the information? Because that's really all that they're going to have access to is the graphs that we're allowing them to get to. And so we need to be able to intuit what are the questions that people are going to ask. Now, hopefully some of the work on that has been done by your organization, which has said, these are the things that we absolutely have to track. Right? These are our key performance indicators. But we shouldn't necessarily assume that just because we've identified our initial indicators, we've thought through sort of what are the follow-up questions that people are going to ask. I should flag that there are lots of programs that will help you build dashboards. Some people will actually just build dashboards in Excel that they can, throw up on like a screen for a presentation. But programs like Microsoft's Power BI allow for you to generate dashboards that can then be exported to websites so that people can sort of log in and access that data in real time, which is handy, which is a nice feature of dashboards. So thinking about what makes for good dashboards, ideally your metrics that you're presenting are going to be things that your organization has identified as important. Sometimes these are called key performance indicators, KPIs. Don't search KPIs, you will get advertisements like mad asking if you want to purchase, software to help you manage your key performance indicators. There's a whole industry built around supporting this kind of data managerial approach. Oftentimes with dashboards, the focus is on presenting quantitative data through graphs and charts, but it's also possible to report qualitative data. And I think I've emphasized this in the past that qualitative data can be very useful to provide some richness to things. And so you can have, a box in your dashboard that's, recent tweets or sentiment analysis of comments that have come in on your webpage that can be part of that story that you're telling with your dashboard. A third sort of thing that you can do with dashboards is that you can wrap your dashboard in external information about how frequently was it updated, how were the different indicators developed, who is providing this information. So giving sort of a context around that information that can be useful for folks who are really curious about the nitty-gritty details of this. Typically, when we're designing dashboards, we have sort of different elements, different boxes or different spaces you're going to look within the dashboard, and each of those nuggets or spaces should have a story. Like instantly, it should communicate a nugget of information. And so again, this is where your key performance indicators, KPIs, come in. Right? Is our key indicator of enrollment trends going up or down? I should be able to pick that up like instantly based on looking at that one element. But based on that one element, I might have a follow-up question like, okay, so I see that enrollment is going up slightly. I wonder where that growth is coming from. Is that enrollment from our on-campus students here at UND, or is that enrollment from our online students here at UND? And so I might want to ask that follow-up question. And ideally, a good dashboard will allow you to sort of select in through slicers or through a filter tool or intuitively to break those two populations apart so that you can see what's the trend for each of those as well. But it sort of guides you through that process by saying, start here, look at this initial story, and then if you want to ask follow-up questions, you have the ability to drill down. And that's sort of the terminology of dashboards, that we're drilling down to sub-patterns when we want to. As we're thinking about other best practices in dashboards, choose appropriate visualization techniques, right? So think about your graphs, think about what's intuitive, think about how to, use color effectively to communicate. Think about readability for your audience, things that we've talked about before, and talking about sort of communicating with single variables. It's worth pointing out that a lot of times dashboards are chocked full of bells and whistles that aren't necessarily intuitive to people. And so this is not just sort of about appropriate data visualization. This goes to my sort of second point, which is do not let programmers make design decisions. Oftentimes, the people who know how to build these things have a background in computer science or programming or statistics, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're well-trained or sensitive to questions about how do you communicate information to an audience. And an audience may not be interested in all the bells and whistles and the abilities to drill down to every different subpopulation. And so a good practice is to have an intermediate person who is thinking about the audience to sort of help guide and direct that design process to be clear and communicate important information without cluttering up what people are looking at. And then a third bit of advice I would offer in terms of, think about the technology and the designing programming part of it, is that it's oftentimes a good idea to design for mobile first, because oftentimes with dashboards, you've got lots of information on a screen. And if you shrink that information down to sort of cell phone size, it becomes really difficult for people to be able to read the graphs and read the text. And so they're zooming in with the pinching, zooming thing. And that makes your dashboard really, really clunky and difficult to use. And so you should always think about how to design for mobile first, and assume that that's the primary mode that people are going to access your dashboard through. And then once you've sort of built for mobile, then you can figure out how it sort of displays and you expand up. And I think that's increasingly become the standard for how people design web pages. We design for mobile first, and then scale up as needed when that's available. Folks who design dashboards haven't quite caught up on that. We should also think about how people read. And so particularly in sort of a Western setting, people tend to start at the top and they tend to read right to left, or left to right, and then sort of zip back over and start that left to right process again. And so as you're thinking about how to present the story in your dashboard, assume that that's sort of the visual line of sight that people are going to take, unless you direct them elsewhere with sort of elements about how you've structured your dashboard. And so at this point, this is all a little abstract because we haven't really looked at dashboards. And so I'll maybe make it a little bit more concrete and say, here are two dashboards that are actually communicating the exact same information. This is the dashboard on the left is the county health officer for Grand Forks County. And the dashboard on the right was the dashboard developed by the city of Grand Forks to communicate the exact same information. And you can go to the Grand Forks city website and see both of these dashboards. They always put the city one before the county one. And there's some interesting differences in terms of these two dashboards that I think are worth highlighting. So what they both do well is that they both have their key performance indicators sort of like easily identifiable, right? They have these boxes that say, these are the things that we're going to track. And so for the public health dashboard, there's 5, maybe 6 things that they're tracking. They've got the sort of cases per day, the yellow box at the top. They've got those the orange, green, red, green boxes that all look at different things, hospitalization status for that last green one. And they've also got the vaccination rate of 2 doses. And so they're tracking these 6 things, and they've got the numbers sort of there in sort of, in bold. The City of Grand Forks dashboard tracks considerably more than that. I think they've got like 10 different things that they're tracking. A lot of them are very similar. They're getting at very similar things, but maybe just normalized over, all the pandemic versus a week. But you know what are what are the things that they're tracking. Both dashboards do wrap their data. They provide information on when it was last updated. I think you can't see it on the city dashboard because my screen is over the top of it, but it's there. Likewise, if you look at the very bottom left-hand corner for the public health dashboard, they've got sort of in fine text, sort of when it was last updated. That's good. And they have information on how it was compiled. And so you can read with the Grand Forks County dashboard, if you have really good eyes and you want to squint, sort of what that looks like. And likewise, that's available, but just hidden with where my screen is at for the city dashboard. Then they diverge in terms of what they're doing. If I was trying to step back and ask the question, which dashboard communicates information to me most effectively, most clearly in a way that I understand, intuit, and believe, I think it's the public health dashboard, hands down, without a doubt. I can very quickly pick out from the public health dashboard, what is the story I'm being told. I have 5 indicators in those boxes that are color coded, and I can quickly look and see these are good and these are bad, and these are kind of in the middle. And I have a little way of visualizing sort of the overall risk that comes from that. That's the little speedometer, right? That's very intuitive. And in the summer, when I was developing these slides, the risk was very low, and we're currently at the orange tipping into red. And I can know that story very quickly, right? And if I missed it, right, it got in bold letters, low risk, in the green box. And so I can pick out that story very quickly. With the city dashboard, I have no idea. I really have no idea if these key performance indicators are good or bad. There are some graphs available to me that I can look at, but it's kind of difficult to line up each key performance indicator with the graph that associates with it. Whereas with the public health dashboard, right, I see that the red key performance indicator, the change in infection rates, that is up by 67%. And I can sort of look across and very quickly see, oh, this is the timeline that corresponds to that. And yeah, it is a big jump, but not the biggest jump that we've seen. I can pick that out very quickly from the way that is designed, and I don't know where to find that in the City of Grand Forks dashboard. Colors used really effectively in the public health dashboard to communicate this is good, this is bad, pay attention here, there's a big change here. Color is terrible in the City of Grand Forks dashboard in that it is a color palette of 2 that doesn't really communicate any additional information to me. I see daily values. Those are those little lines that go up with each of the graphs. Then there's the blue line that's the weekly average. And so, yeah, I can see the weekly average, but I'm not getting any additional information out of that. When I think about sort of general design and aesthetics, I also think the public health dashboard does a much better job of directing the eye. And again, it comes back to the idea of lining up your key performance indicator with the graph that is associated with that. It's much easier to do that. I would flag, however, that both dashboards were designed for the web and didn't think about mobile. And so even though the public health dashboard could very easily be designed for the web by saying, okay, you've got your wrapper at the top, you've got the low risk and the speedometer sort of as the next piece, and then you have each key performance indicator, as like a block in your vertical scrolling page. They didn't do that. They locked into this sort of rigid structure of 2 columns of information. I'm not sure exactly how you could adjust the city dashboard to be able to be mobile friendly. Again, it's not just that things are sort of built into a static page, it's that they're not necessarily linked together in a way that would make for easy movement through through the information that's available. And so I think this is a really useful illustration, given that we're looking at literally the exact same data, of how attention to design, attention to your key performance indicators, and giving your initial nugget of information followed by the appropriate sort of drill down what's been a trend line over time, can be helpful to your audience to make sense quickly about what's happening in your data, versus design decisions that don't necessarily focus on communicating clearly, resulting in a lot of information that requires a lot of work to be able to sort of distill down to what's actually happening and what are the trends and what are the patterns on the ground.